Hello, thank you for having me.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
How do you? Yeah.
I'm a little under the weather, but I'm feeling good.
What kind of under the weather? The cold?
Like, I don't know, it's like this massive monster cough.
Oh man, and they last so long.
They last so
Yeah.
long. It's ridiculous, but hopefully I'm on the end of it.
You spend much time in Toronto?
I came here a couple months ago for something for American Express, and it was great. I love this city. I want to come back.
It's not bad, hey.
It's so nice. It's like clean New York.
that's
is.
that's our slogan. You didn't see it on the sign?
No. I thought I made it up.
Yeah. Welcome to Toronto.
Clean New York.
Clean New York. So much to get to with you. I'm going to start with The Hate You Give with this film, based on the best-selling novel by Angie Thomas. How familiar were you with the book before the film?
I had heard of the book, but I hadn't read it until the conversations about the film came up. And when I read the book, I was just absolutely in love. And then read the backstory about, Angie writing the book as her senior thesis. And just the journey that she's taken is absolutely inspirational.
What was it about the book that you loved?
I mean, the perspective of a young black female dealing with, the aftermath of her friend's death, the duality of her roles in growing up in the hood but going to a white school. It just felt incredibly relatable. And just the young black female's perspective specifically, you don't get to hear about, there's Trayvon Martin's friend who was, the key witness and what she was going through.
Right.
And I think about Philando Castile's fiance. Like, those are perspectives and the grief that they have to endure for such a long period of time. It's just, you don't think about that side.
Well, like I said, there's like so many complex issues in The Hate That You Give. I mean, racial profiling, police brutality, code switching. And as you point out, we're talking about a movie, we're talking about a book here, but these are real life conversations that people are living and having all the time.
That's the unfortunate part, is that this will always be timely until it's not.
Yeah.
So even in doing the film, there've just been several police deaths, police brutality deaths, just in this year alone. So many, and so the fact that this movie is coming out and you can look at the most recent death as an example is really, really sad.
Is the conversations happening in the book, like how closely does that parallel the conversations that are happening in your own life, just with you and your friends?
I mean, there's definitely an exhaustion of discussing it. You know, we all have our own group chats. Like, there's so many group chats that I'm in where we'll bring them up. Just as like, what do we do, or what can we do, or here's another one. And it's just like, there's a feeling of hopelessness. And I think this film in particular is about finding your voice. And that's also what's inspirational about, like, trying to figure out what you can do.
This star is 16 years old in The Hate That You Give.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a character that, I mean, when I was doing research for this, I was finding schools teaching The Hate You Give as part of their curriculum.
Yes.
Right? Do you know how I found that? It was because I found all those websites that are like, don't have time to read it?
Those websites that I perused in college and high school.
Those websites that got me through Macbeth. But I think it's the mark of success if you have a website about like that.
I think so.
But what do you think it is about Star? She's 16 years old. She's seen a police brutality death, as you said. What is it about her that makes her so relatable, that makes so many people glom onto her?
She's a teenager, and I think we all remember during that time when you're just trying to fit in. You're trying not to stand out. You're just trying to also find out who you are.
Yeah.
And Star happens to be doing all those things and happens to lose her best friend to police violence. So imagine trying to figure out who you are and to find your voice when you need it the most. And for me, what makes Star relatable is that, I went to high school in the hood, but also had an experience, going to a private school and having to balance those personalities to a degree, the personas. Like, she has to be a certain way, or so she thinks, with white people, and then gets to feel most comfortable in her skin with black people, but also has to kind of front to a degree. And I think so many people of color have been there.
Yeah, the code switching.
The code switching.
The having to change what they say around the different folks that they're
Yeah,
around.
and how you act.
Yeah. Who's your character here? That you're.
I play April, who is a social justice lawyer and who helps Star to find her voice. She's
an activist.
She's an activist, and she's tired, and she needs a win. She needs I admire so many of these activists who are out there constantly rallying people and constantly bringing awareness. And so often you just don't get justice. You always hear those stories about this cop was let free or this killing was justified. And April is on the heels of just constantly losing, quote unquote. And in Star, she sees an opportunity. There's a witness for once. And she just wants justice.
I love the depiction of April as tired.
Aren't we all, though?
But it's something that we don't talk about. I remember seeing Ta-Nehisi Coates on Stephen Colbert's show. And at the end, Stephen Colbert asks him, what gives you hope in this world? And I just feel like that burden is placed on so many people that people aren't allowed to be tired.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to feel hopeless. You know what I mean?
Because it's almost selfish to feel hopeless, but it's also, you can't help but to. I was just thinking about this the other day, just in terms of, seeing the 11-year-old girl that got tased by the police. And it's just like, what can I do?
Yeah.
And that's my focus. It's just, for me, I know so many of us feel like we're so action-oriented, and it can only do so much to talk about it when you're constantly faced with like, oh, that this police officer won't be brought to justice. It's like little by little there's a change, but you want to know what more you can do.
And then there's people like me, and I'm not just doing that self-effacing thing, but like people in the media who go, so where do you find hope in all this? Like, where do you find what this? I don't mean to be rude here, but like what an absurd question sometimes, Or what an inhuman question for the way people actually work and that we're not caricatures.
Yeah, it's just you want to know that other people care, though. And I was having this conversation yesterday. We need allies so much, and you need, Black people talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
We know what it is. You're, in a sense, when you're speaking out to other Black people, it's like you're preaching to the choir. And where you need help is you need, unfortunately, white people to care. You need white people to tell their friends. You need people who are related to police officers. People respect police officers. We understand that they keep us safe, but there is a serious problem. There is a problem that there is a fear and a hatred and a disdain for Black people in this country, and we want to feel protected, but there's an issue. And so we need these conversations to be happening, and hopefully this film will prompt those conversations. Mm-hmm. And those conversations will lead to action. If
you're just tuning in, I'm speaking with Issa Rae, one of the stars of the upcoming film, The Hate U Give. She's also the star and creator of the Peabody Award-winning HBO series, Insecure. I'll say it again. Hey. The Peabody Award-winning HBO series, Insecure, a comedy that follows the trial and tribulations of two best friends in L.A., currently in its third season. Congrats on the Peabody.
Thank you. I haven't heard that. Peabody Award-winning series in an introduction. That's amazing.
How do you find that out? Is it a phone call? Is it?
I found it out on the internet the morning of, and I wasn't sure because it wasn't clear.
You found out like I found out?
Kinda, yeah. And I text the writers like, hey, I saw it on the website, but I'm not sure. Did we win this, y'all? And they were like, yeah, we definitely won this. And so then we, a couple weeks later, got to go to the awards ceremony. And it was a great awards ceremony because you win already.
You're right. There's no camera on you waiting to, because we're all kind of, let's be honest, when we're watching an award show, we're always kind of watching who's not going to win and how they're going to react.
Who puts their speech back in their pocket.
I love it when they get angry too.
Yes. Oh my God. I was there for an award show when someone got angry, and I was like living. And I had just lost, so I was like, I get you. I mean, I wasn't mad as mad as her. I wasn't mad at all, but I was like, girl, I get you.
Your character, Issa, and your own name, Issa, how often do people get that confused?
Every single day of my life.
People calling out to you as if you're your character?
All the time. Even in interviews. I'll do interviews, and people will be like, so when you did this, and I was like, oh, and I always, and it sucks, I hate referring to myself in the third person, but I have to remind myself that it's not me that I'm talking about.
Right. Is that a good thing, though?
No, it's a terrible thing.
But is it a good thing for the show?
How? Do you tell me? I keep thinking about the fact that I have to do another project because now, even in rap lyrics, I've always wanted to be, I've always wanted to have a shout out in rap lyrics.
Right.
From being a young girl. And I'm like, my last name, Rae, it rhymes with so many things. Mm-hmm. But now I realize when I'm brought up, it's like, you insecure, like Issa Rae. And it's like, oh, no.
Oh, that's great. That's not what you want.
Now I have to have a regal character with the name Issa.
So many of my friends talk about how Issa in Insecure is that it's a depiction of the Black female experience that she's never seen on television. A friend of mine said that to me the other day. How does that feel when you hear that? Do people come talk to you about that in particular? People who actually enjoy the show, not are critics?
That's amazing. Yeah. Anytime somebody comes up to you and is like, "Oh, I relate to this story," like, you just feel honored, and because there's an element of truth. There's, in creating this, it was because I didn't see, this type of depiction of Black women, and I didn't go out to like create the Black female experience at all by any means. And so there is a pressure anytime you do a Black show when there's not a huge representation, on the spectrum, then you get the pressure of like, this has to be the end all be all experience of Black women. And I've always made it clear, like, this is a very specific experience.
Well, that's the reason I ask whether that's okay that people come up and talk to you like this is because I also know in interviews you've talked about how sometimes you have to face questions like, what is the underlying political message of Insecure? Or, what does it say about Black culture in 2018? And you've said, I mean, rightly so, these are not questions that white filmmakers, that white TV creators have to, no one's asking about the larger perspective on Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Nope. And so that, there is an unfair burden of just like because you're Black, you have to tackle these issues. And for me, like...
Is it a burden?
It's just an annoyance.
Yeah.
And I think that's also why this was great. Like, I don't want to have to constantly have discussions about how this is changing the world, if at all. And I'm like, I just want to tell a good story at the end of the day that features the Black people that I know in my life. And is that enough?
But it's funny you say changing the world, because what's going on now with Melania Trump and Insecure? What happened?
Nothing. Literally nothing happened.
What happened?
I did an interview where I spoke about how much I love the fact that our former president, Barack Obama, and his wife, First Lady Michelle, loved Insecure. And I got to talk to them separately about that. And that feeling of being able to have the White House and feel like they have your back. They have your best interests at heart. And they mess with you so hard. And I was like, I'll never have that feeling with Melania. Like, and I jokingly said, if Melania, why should I be like, oh, guess we have to cancel it? Because our interests aren't aligned. And I just know that the White House does not have my best interests at heart.
Right.
Or so many of our best interests at heart. And so then, clickbait culture said, Issa Rae threatens to cancel Insecure if Melania watches it. Okay. And then her spokesperson was like, well, she watches it. And so I was like, does Melania watch it or her body double? And now I have maggots in my mentions.
Are you staying off the internet for now?
No, I mean...
Because I know you take breaks, which I get.
For sure.
I took a 4-week break over the summer. It's the best thing I ever did.
It's the best thing in life. And when the show is on, I'm on. But then I can't wait for it to be off. So,
you make this show starting as a web series, then it becomes, then Insecure happens. But you're just creating things. Like you said, you're just trying to tell stories about you and your friends, about your life, about the life of people you know. But now it's being talked about by the president, and now it's being talked about by the first lady. How do you navigate that?
By just being like, that's cool, and keeping it pushing.
Doesn't affect you?
It affects me in the sense that I feel proud, and again, it's cool, but for me, it's like, what's next? What's next? What's next? You live in the moment, and when it's brought up again, then I get to relive it. But
sorry.
No, not at all. But it's just that. It's cool. I'm grateful.
Yeah, I hear you. I get what you're saying. It's just, that's a crazy situation to find yourself in.
It is, and it won't happen again.
I hope.
In my lifetime, I don't think.
You're right. Maybe so. You made a point of saying that you said, like, we have different audiences. That's not for Melania Trump. That's not for Donald Trump. And there's also been this clickbait culture where, you see a lot of, Issa Rae says Insecure isn't for white people and isn't for men. Obviously, we're not that kind of show. Obviously, it doesn't mean that white folks and men can't watch the show.
Exactly that.
That's not the point. But what inspired that message to begin with? Did it make for any weird moments with HBO executives or anything like that?
No, like HBO executives, just shout out to them. I can't give them enough credit. They just give you space to create, and they never, I made it very clear, like, this is my audience, and whenever I'm writing, I'm always thinking about my friends and my family. Like, will they laugh? Will they get it? Will they mess with it? And I never wanted to feel like I had to over-explain certain things about, our culture, and HBO never...
There are things I'm not going to get, and that's whatever.
And that's fine. Just
whatever.
like you mentioned Curb, like, and I say this all the time, there's so many, like, jokes about being Jewish in Curb. and Yiddish phrases that I had to Google.
Yeah,
And I was just like, it's not for me.
We had a poet, Jose Olivares, on yesterday, and he didn't translate some of the Spanish parts of his poems. And he said, well, how many times do I have to look up who Johnny Depp is?
Hello? Johnny Depp, though?
Well, I think I meant John Wayne, or something like that,
But I mean, that's accurate. And so you just keep it pushing, and there's just certain elements that that people will relate to. And if you don't get it, you don't get it. You keep it pushing. And that's what I meant. I never said, don't you dare watch this, white people and men. Like, I was just like, I wasn't thinking about that audience when I wrote this. And they're watching and they're relating, and that's great.
So many people...
Sorry, I'm a cough.
Of course. We even have the button.
I know. I've always wanted to use that button, but not.
I had a friend of mine ask whether it meant if you press the button, it coughs. Like, there's a cough sound effect. I was like, no, that's not what... We don't have a button for that. Why would we have a button?
Why would you need that?
You seem to have a microscope on you in a positive and negative way. You have people like my friend who say, I've never seen anything like this. Finally, something speaking to my experience. Finally, the show I've been waiting for at least since the early 90s, when there were a bunch of sitcoms for black folks, but apparently they stopped in the late 90s or something like that. And then you have the president and the first lady, and not just them, but the MAGA folks at you on Twitter. I'm curious what concrete things you do to ward off any insecurities, ward off any... How do you navigate this? I'm looking for concrete how you do it.
Like how I fend off my professional insecurities?
Yeah. Just deal with
it's an ongoing journey. I think staying off social media, for one thing. Like, there's nothing... I think about, like, that first season in the writer's room where we had no expectations. Nobody knew what the show was going to be. Nobody really knew me, and I long for that, and I try to chase that. Like, I was just telling someone on a plane ride the other day, or not the other day, just yesterday, coming here. I was like, I think I want people to know me professionally, but not personally. Like, my ideal situation would be on this plane ride, you'd be like, Issa was on that plane with us? I didn't know. I just want to kind of blend in and let the work speak for itself. And so for me, it's just so much of that is just making sure that I only speak when I have something to say, or, take things lightly, but I just I want my work to speak for itself. So I do a lot of, like, I close myself off a lot and stick with the people that, I know and feel comfortable around.
The thing about The Hate U Give is that Angie Thomas has said she wasn't seeing stories being told that reflected her and her friends. She made it herself first, and then she shopped it around. She made it herself and then waited for people to come to it. And I bet you can see a parallel there.
100%. I feel like that's the model. I think that's the model for so many black people, for so many people of color creators. Like, I've seen that's kind of been the trend for getting people to notice you. It's like, for so long, Hollywood has been like, this isn't going to be marketable. This isn't going to have an audience. And because of the internet, because of social media, because of sort of this self-sufficient way, we've been able to prove them wrong time and time again. And so now they're like clamoring for content from us.
And you're there to give it to them, even though you may not use your real name next time.
I may not use my real name, no.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming in.
It's been a pleasure. Sorry I coughed all over your mic.
Well, we'll expense you later. It'll be okay. Don't worry about it.